Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are, everybody. My name is Hugh Simpson-Wells. I'm the CEO of Oxford Computer Group, and today I'm going to be in conversation with Andy Swiffin and Ian Swift, infrastructure architects at the University of Dundee in Scotland, and I'll be asking them about their experience with FIM and MIM. In fact, what I'd like to do is for them to introduce themselves in a moment, and that'll be a sound check for us as well. And then I'm just going to give you a very quick 3-minute tutorial on what FIM and MIM is, just in case you don't know, and then we'll get into the main thing. So Andy and Ian, would you mind introducing yourselves, please?
Hi, I'm Andy Swiffin. I've worked for the University of Dundee for 35 years, and of those 25 years I've worked in identity and access management. Just to give you some background, Dundee is a city on the east coast of Scotland. We have around about 25,000 students and staff.
And I'm Ian Swift. I've worked at the University of Dundee for about 10 years. Initially I was employed to look after our email system, which was Novell Groupwise at the time. But then we outsourced our email to Office 365, and since then I've been working with Andy in identity and access management for about the last 6 years.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Now, for those of you that may not know much about FIM and MIM, here's the FIM-MIM 3-minute primer from me. First of all, Microsoft Identity Manager 2016, or MIM as we like to call it, is an updated and obviously renamed version of Forefront Identity Manager 2012. That's FIM to us. Functionally, they're actually very similar, and their history goes back even further through other name changes. And fundamentally, it's about synchronization. Typically, many organizations are going to have an HR system full of users. They're going to have Active Directory full of users, and other systems, other directories and databases also full of users. And they have to have some way of getting the users from one to another, of perhaps keeping them in synchronization with each other. There are lots of ways of doing that. You could do it manually, of course. You could use some kind of scripting system, or you could use a more formal system, and that's what FIM or MIM is about. So if we imagine that we've got our HR system with all our users, we want to make sure that we properly synchronize them so that we end up with the same users in HR, in AD, at least the ones that we want, the active ones. So when somebody arrives in HR and they're meant to be in AD, they get provisioned to AD and indeed to any other directories that are required, and that they stay in synchronization. So attributes as they change in HR, like anything might be something quite trivial like a phone number, it might be something quite important like their status or a job title or something. It will be properly synchronized everywhere else. Many organizations will also have cloud assets of various kinds, and lots of them will have Azure Active Directory as well as Active Directory, and perhaps Office 365 and other applications are making use of this. Well, of course, it's going to be useful to synchronize those as well. And typically, we do that using another synchronization engine. Azure AD Connect is the latest incarnation of something that used to be called DirSync, and then I think it was called AD Sync. It's now called Azure AD Connect. It's actually based on FIM. So it's fundamentally the same engine, but it's a very cut-down version with a particular job. And it keeps the Active Directory users in synchronization with the Azure Active Directory users, and indeed groups and other things. There is actually a FIM portal as well. We're not going to spend really very much time on this, but the FIM portal, if we get the users into that as well, we can do a few other things. We can manage groups in a very formalized way. We can use it for self-service password reset. Of course, you can do these things in the cloud as well. And we can also offer a sort of white pages because we've brought together all that user information in one place. And we can run workflows. We might want to have a workflow that sends a notification of some kind or creates a home directory, that kind of thing. Now, educational establishments in particular, of course, are also going to have students. There's typically going to be some kind of student database, some student system, and you're going to have students as well, and they need managing too. And it may well be that you want those in Active Directory and perhaps in Azure Active Directory so that they also can get the benefits of having Office 365 or whatever it is you want. We're going to focus on something slightly more particular, so I'm going to leave this slide up because it's just something that we can talk to a little bit with relation to Dundee, and we've just got a specific student system there, specific HR system, also as it happens a door control system, Satyan, and the other directory at the top is ADLDS, but and so we can refer to this as we need to. Okay, so having discussed FIM and MIM in general. Andy, what are the main challenges of managing identity in the education sector, do you think?
Well, there are a few unique features of identity management within education. As I said, we have about 25,000 staff and students, and many of you in industry might be saying, well, you know, that's not so big, that's not such a big directory. Well, of those 25,000, 5,000 come in each year as new students and 5,000 leave each year. But the full horror doesn't end there because we give accounts to applicants. And so we might have 30,000 applicants being created in our directories and 30,000 leaving each year. And in fact, we ended up with an AD of about 85,000 user objects. And so it's this churn of users that's a big challenge for us. Of course, we have to provision these identities out to a number of different connected systems, ADLDS, AD, and so on. And there's a number of systems that need the identities and in a timely way. So, of course, automation is the key. You can't do this kind of thing without automated processes, and the automation keeps you sane and secure.
Fantastic. So, Ian, in what way does identity management help the University of Dundee to cope with this turnover of digital identities so efficiently and securely?
Well, as Andy alluded to, the automation of processes is absolutely the key to coping with this. We have a standard account lifecycle for our staff and a standard account lifecycle for our students that govern things like when an IT account is provisioned, what it can access, and when it should be deprovisioned. Using automated processes helps make sure that people understand these life cycles because it means the same thing happens every time at the same time. Say after a staff member leaves the university, their account will be closed down after 28 days. The life cycle for students, however, presents a particular challenge. As Andy said, we create applicant accounts as soon as somebody applies to join the university. But because they're not actually members of the university, we can't give them access to everything that we would give a normal student access to. So things like federated library resources and things like that. But we do want them to have access to our VLE, to our student applicant portal, and to email, so we've got an easy way to get in contact with them. The way we do this is we use FIM to manage attributes in these accounts, which determines what systems they get provisioned to. As they progress to being full students, FIM modifies these attributes and provisions them to more systems. Similarly, when a student graduates, we can't allow them to retain access to things like external federated resources and some other systems for licensing reasons. But we do allow them to keep their email account for a year to help them transition into work if, for example, they've been applying for jobs using that. This would all be a nightmare to manage manually, and to be honest, wouldn't happen if we had to do it manually. But using robust automated processes means it all just happens as if by magic.
Okay, that's great. So you talked there about the slightly different life cycles then of employees and students and how FIM or MIM is able to deal with the changes as time goes on. I think this is a good point to see if our audience is awake. I've got a quick poll here which I'd like them to respond to. Just want to find out where people are currently. Might be helpful to give us some sort of idea. So a lot of people using FIM and MIM already, that's interesting. Some people using a script of some type, seems to be settling down at about a quarter of people using a script. some other sync service which we don't know about. Apologies to Novell for misspelling their name. So most of you voted, and we're seeing about 3/4 of you are already using FIMMIM, so that's interesting. A quarter of you using a script of some kind. Okay, Andy, when did you first install FIM, and what brought you to FIM?
Well, like I said earlier, I've been working in identity and access management now for about 25 years. Of course, back in those days, there were no tools that you could buy to do anything, and so everything that we had to do was homegrown. And to a large extent, we're still using homegrown solutions. And, you know, I talk to people in academic institutions all around the UK and abroad. And, you know, if I had £1 for every time somebody told me that they do their main identity management using a suite of Perl scripts that were written by somebody who no longer works with them, and they haven't a clue what they do, and they're terrified to touch them, then today I would be a very rich man and would be sitting on a beach somewhere. And to some extent, we're in the same boat. We are, or were, a very big Novell site. We have had several Novell e-directory trees, each optimized to specific tasks. For instance, a flat one for authentication, one for to service our telephony infrastructure, and so on. We use Novell IDM to synchronize the identity data between all these different trees. Of course, when we put in Office 365 to replace our group-wise system, we put in an AD to service that. And it was logical for us at the time to make the AD a slave of our Novell infrastructure and populate that with Novell IDM as well. Well, you know, time went on, and we started to deploy much more Windows storage and other AD consumers. And we started to say to ourselves, you know, why are we maintaining two totally separate directory structures? And why are we still doing things using these homegrown Perl scripts, which are very unsupportable? Is there a more standardized and supportable way that we can move forward? So we started to cast around for an alternative to what we were doing, and we started to look at FIM. We saw that there was the OCG FIM Foundation course, and so in June 2012 we went on that course with an aim to try and understand what FIM could do. Could it do everything that we needed? And then we spent a year playing with FIM to try and get the measure of the capabilities.
Okay, thanks. So, Ian, can you tell me a bit more about how you learned about FIM and MIM and were able to apply it?
Yes, certainly. That first taste of MIM at the OCG Foundation course was really useful. It gave us the confidence that FIM could do the sort of things that we wanted it to do. And it also let us see some features that we hadn't really thought about before, which was useful. A year after we'd done that, after we'd spent that year playing, we attended the OCG Advanced course, which gave us a much better understanding of how we could use FIM to solve some of the challenges we were facing. Just after we'd done that, we started our own migration for real and started putting what we'd learned on these courses into practice. So we got a fair way down the line with that, but we did the expert course as well the following year. As we'd found that as our knowledge and our experience expanded, we were finding we needed to push the boundaries a bit more than what we'd been doing before and wanted to really understand the nitty-gritty of how FIM and its rules, extensions, etc. work. I think it's fair to say that these OCG courses were the best courses that either Andy or myself have ever been on. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on an OCG webinar. All too often when we attend training courses, you find that the person taking the course seems to have read the book and is now just reading it back to you. If you ask anything slightly off topic, they often don't have a clue. But I can honestly say that with the OCG training, it was nothing like that. It was obvious that the trainer had a wealth of real-world experience to share with us. In addition to this, we've also set up a JISC mailing list for people in academic institutions to talk about what they're doing with Microsoft Identity products. And we've also arranged a few meetings over the past few years to get our peers together in one place to have a chat about it. all of these things have been pretty useful.
Well, obviously, I'm really pleased to hear that you got so much out of our courses. Andy, how has this knowledge that you gained helped you get the maximum from your investment in FIM?
Well, we're still in our migration phase from our legacy infrastructure to our new where we want to be, and so we're still finding new challenges of things that we hadn't really thought about before, and we're finding that the knowledge that we've gained in the courses and from looking at FIM has enabled us really to basically we've solved all of the problems we've hit. FIM has been able to do everything that we've asked of it, and the techniques that we've learned we've been able to use and deploy and learn a lot of new ones as well. FIM is very versatile but very complex, so it was really important for us to have gained that knowledge and then start using it. FIM has enabled us to adopt a phased migration rather than something which is a big bang, which in our experience usually ends in big tears. We've been able to do a phased migration from our legacy infrastructure to where we want to be, which is largely invisible to the users. And the way that FIM can take attributes from various sources and then gradually just move over the focus of authority has been really useful. Because FIM offers lots of standardized connectors to disparate systems, we've been able to integrate the various things that we need to do, like for instance ADLDS. We make a lot of use of that for various authentication sources and various data provisioning sources. That's in our door control system, again is provisioned by FIM, as of course is our AD, and we're able to put information where it needs to be at the right time and governed by the attributes that are coming in. So the fact that FIM is a standardized tool rather than something that we've come up with in a darkened room also means that we can get help from outside when we need it, because other people understand it too, and it works for them just as it works for us.
Fantastic. In fact, I think it's a really nice point about the gradual rollout, and I think that's one of the great features of FIMMIM, is that it absolutely doesn't have to be a big bang, and we would never advocate it either. I mean, just for everybody else, evidently, Andy and Ian, between what they already knew and what they learned about FIMMIM, were able to go and are installing this and configuring it for themselves. Help is available, of course. We're a consultancy, and there are other consultancies if you want to bring somebody else in to do it. Ian, you're upgrading to MIM, I believe. But why are you going to do that, and how will you do it?
If I could give a little bit of history, you mentioned the portal earlier, the FIM portal, and when we first got into this, we were very excited by the portal. We thought we could do devolve group management, creation of visitor accounts and things like that to various people out across the university. Unfortunately, we discovered that the FIM portal as it was only allowed you to only work with Internet Explorer. We have staff across campus using a huge variety of devices, and some of it that was reliant on a specific browser just wouldn't cut it. The other problem we had at this stage was we discovered that the automated approval mail workflows that integrate with Outlook didn't work if you had Exchange Online. You had to have an on-premise Exchange server for that. So we had to put these plans on hold, which was a bit of a shame at the time. But now we see that MIM 2016 SP1 offers cross-browser and Exchange Online support. We can resurrect these plans, so we're quite excited about that. As to how we'll do it, we've decided that we're not going to do an in-place upgrade of our current FIM installation, but instead we'll put in a parallel MIM instance, as this will allow us to do a refresh of the servers that it's running on as well. The great thing about this is because of the way that FIMMIM works, as yourself and Andy have just been talking about, is that we'll be able to phase control of various attributes from FIM across to MIM in a nice controlled manner.
Okay, nice. So I think that that's given us a great picture of what you're doing and the journey you've been through. I think we decided we would keep plenty of time at the end of this for any questions from any of our audience. So certainly inviting anybody to enter a question now, type a question in, and or indeed enter into the chat window, and we'll do our best to deal with any questions. I don't see much activity on that front. Well, the audience were obviously awake because they did the poll. 95% voted, so I guess we have to say that nobody's got any questions. It's your last chance, otherwise I'm just going to have to give you 5 minutes of your life back again. Oh, did you have to write a lot of code for FIM to work? Ah, that's a good question. Who wants to take that?
We found that on certain attributes, you had to do some transformation. Not a lot of code, no. But for instance, like if you want to import the last logon timestamp or password last reset time from AD, that is the very natty attribute, which is a number of 100 millisecond ticks since the 1st of January in 1601. Which is not a lot of use in many environments. So we do a transformation in a rules extension. It's only about 2 or 3 lines just to transform that into a more useful form. And that's generally been the kind of code that we've needed to do, where we're wanting to transform an attribute from one form into another. We have yet to put our account creation. Well, actually, no, that's a bad word. Account creation. Accounts get created automatically as they come in from HR, and as they come in from SITs. What we add through the account management process is things like the unique login ID and that kind of thing. And we're just about to move that into FIM, which will require a lookup against previously allocated identifiers and then the allocation of that value. But again, we're only talking just a few lines of code. So rather than sitting down with a huge 1,000-line Perl script to do all kinds of complicated things, with FIM, the programming has been all about creating little bits, little snippets to do a specific job.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that, by the way, that it's presented often as a weakness of FIM and MIM that you inevitably have to write some code, and you just to do provisioning you have to write some code. But I actually think it's one of its greatest strengths because it gives you flexibility that otherwise wouldn't be there. But I think that your experience is a typical experience. Occasionally we find we have to write a lot of code because of some super complex situation, but very often not. So Peter Locastro has asked if you're using, are you using Azure AD Connect to manage Office 365 accounts? Who wants to take that?
Yes, we are. We've been doing that since the end of July. We obviously DirSync was going end of life, but a big driver for doing this for us was so we could use the Azure self-service password reset. And actually that's proven to be a huge success for us because our service desk are reporting that compared to October 2015, password reset related calls have come down by 50%. So that's quite a big win. Our service desk are very happy about this.
Okay, that's great. So but the fundamental answer to the question is yes, that is what you're doing with AD Connect. Yeah. Okay. I'm not answering these necessarily in the order they've come in, because I think just because of the way they flow a little bit. Stephen Spencer has asked the question, which of your systems would you say is your primary source for sourcing identities, and how is that handled during your phased implementation?
The primary source has to be the authoritative source, which is the HR system and the SIT system. So they are the primary source, the authoritative source of everything. to do with a person. But of course then we add value to that in the form of the login name, email address and so on. Up until now we've still been doing that in our legacy Novell Perl scripts, and we're about now, because we're about to adopt a different format of our login name, and it seemed daft to do a job in one form and then redo it in something else. So we've been holding off, but we are about to move that the focus of that over into FIM. But it's essentially all we're doing is adding a little bit of value to the identity in FIM, but the authoritative source comes from the HR and student record system.
And the second part of the question was about how it's handled during your phased implementation, but I think that that's probably pretty simple to answer, is that that there isn't a phasing there. There comes a point where you have to switch over.
Yeah, it's just a matter of attribute precedence. We have the same attribute that is being sourced using the Perl script in our E directory, and it's the same attribute that's coming in from the HR system or from SITS. And there comes a day when you go into the Metaverse Designer and just change the order of precedence, and then the HR system and the FIM directly connected system takes over. There's not, it's the most unimpressive change ever, because you change that order of precedence, and if you've got it right, nothing happens.
Oh, good. Joe Hansen's asked a couple of questions. His first question is, what are some of the caveats and challenges of a MIM SP1 upgrade? We're currently running MIM 2016, and I guess you guys, Andy, probably can't give a great answer to that because you haven't done it yet, but I would rather send you a few notes than give out an answer, partly because I haven't got them in front of me. So what I would say is to Joe and anybody else who'd like those notes, could you simply email info@oxfordcomputergroup.com, and I will make sure that, and indicate the nature of the request, and I will send some notes out to you. Joe Hansen's second question is, have you had any experience using Workday HCM as a source for MIM? I think the answer to that is yes, we have. Workday is becoming more and more common. Again, if you'd like something a bit more specific, I don't think there are any big issues with Workday, but if you want something more specific, please email. I'm aware that we're running out of time as well. Great question from Gafar Khan. How did you sell this to senior management, as they will not see a lot of benefits because these are very much background tasks, but the cost of implementation can be high?
It's the cost of implementing, or the cost of maintaining two different systems. Of course there's a licensing for the whole Novell infrastructure as well, but it's the person cost in managing two totally separate directory systems. We are going to be so pleased when we turn off the old system.
Also, it's getting increasingly difficult to find people with the skills to manage the old system, the old e-directory stuff.
So necessity was the mother of the purse strings there.
I think it always is.
Okay. Stephen Spencer has another great question, which I know this comes up a lot. Do you have a lot of crossover of roles between staff and students? In other words, how do you deal with a student becoming a member of staff, or even the other way around?
Right. Well, we're fighting over which of us won't have to answer that question. That is the real old chestnut, isn't it? How do you cope with somebody who's both a member of staff and a student? I can't claim to have ever solved that one, and when you find somebody who has, let them know that I'm interested.
Okay.
Also, having said that, we're about to move to a new integrated business system, which apparently, if you are a staff member and a student, you will only have one ID in there. So,
okay, that's interesting. So that's obviously an approach. But I think what I can add to this is that we have solved this problem many times, but it's always a matter of following the business logic of the organization. In other words, we can usually make FIM, MIM do what's needed. It may be complicated, it may involve some code, it may involve some clever jiggery-pokery, but we usually manage. But the starting point is, what's the business requirement exactly? You know, what do you expect to happen? Very hard to answer that question in any more detail in a webinar like this. If anybody is really desperate to hear more about this, again, info@oxfordcomputergroup.com. We will see those emails, and if you indicate the nature of the question, we can try and give you a more fulsome answer. I'm going to have to draw it to a close because we've come to the end of the half hour, and some of us have hard stops. So thank you very much for great questions. Thank you very much to Andy and Ian for that insight. And I think, without further ado, it's goodbye and see you some other time on some other webinar. Thank you very much indeed.